All right, guys, welcome back, or should I say, welcome to the PenTest Plus Learning Path walkthrough series from TryHackMe. So, a couple weeks ago, I released the first video going through the Nmap room, and then TryHackMe hit me one out of left field that they completely redid their entire PenTest Plus path. So, the path that we already did on that is actually not even in the room anymore. There is plenty of Mmap stuff. And as someone who now holds the PenTest Plus certification, that is definitely going to be something that is very important for you to understand for the PenTest Plus certification is Nmap. You got to know that at every single aspect of that tool for that exam. So for the first video though, and I actually like the way that they started out with this better than they did with their previous one, you're going to learn pen testing fundamentals. And these fundamentals are basically just teaching you about all of the different non-technical things of a penetration test, which especially for the PenTest Plus exam is a very essential thing to know. And really, before you do any type of real world pen test engagement or anything, this is some very important different stuff that you need to be aware of. And so today I'm going to walk through this room. We'll read through all this stuff together. I'll add my thoughts on a couple different things where they're at as someone just that does a little bit of this and has experience doing it. And I will let you know. So for task 1, what is penetration testing? So before teaching you the technical hands-on aspects of ethical hacking, you'll need to understand more about what a penetration tester's job responsibilities are and what processes are followed in performing pen tests, finding vulnerabilities in a client's application or system. The importance and relevancy of cybersecurity are ever increasing and can be in every walk of life. News headlines fill our screen, reporting yet another hack or data leak. Cybersecurity is relevant to all people in the modern world, including a strong password policy to protect your emails or to businesses and to other organizations needing to both protect devices and data from damages. A penetration test, or pen test, is an ethically driven attempt to test and analyze the security defenses to protect these assets and pieces of information. A penetration test involves using the same tools, techniques, and methodologies that someone with malicious intent would use and is similar to an audit. According to Security Magazine, a cybersecurity industry magazine, there are over 2,200 cyber attacks every day, one attack every 39 seconds. So all you have to do for that is just read that page, go ahead and click that, and move on to the next one. So penetration testing ethics. The battle of legality and ethics in cybersecurity, let alone penetration testing, is always controversial. Labels like hacking and hacker often hold negative connotations, especially in pop culture, thanks to a few bad apples. The idea of legally gaining access to a computer system is a challenging concept to grasp. After all, what exactly makes it legal? Recall that a penetration test is an authorized audit of a computer system's security and defenses as agreed by the owners of the systems. The legality of penetration is pretty clear-cut in this sense. Anything that falls outside of this agreement is deemed unauthorized. Before a penetration testing starts, a formal discussion occurs between the penetration tester and the system owner. Various tools, techniques, and systems to be tested are agreed on. This discussion forms the scope of a penetration testing agreement and will determine the course the penetration test takes. Now, this is something that I think people really struggle with when they're first getting into cybersecurity and they're learning about penetration testing. And this is something that I had a hard time wrapping my mind around for a while. But when you think about what we're actually trying to accomplish with a penetration test, we're thinking about moving all the way through and simulating a real world, real life scenario if someone started to attack. And so the idea of being hired by a company to conduct a penetration test on their system, but then not actually move all the way through the penetration test and not actually test every avenue or not use every single tool when you're trying to prepare them for an attacker that will use every single tool and isn't going to have any boundaries and won't, cut corners as you might in a penetration test. But the thing you got to understand is that certain penetration testing tools and certain techniques can actually damage the systems and, maybe not just destroy them, but they could take them offline. And for certain companies, taking a web server down and, preventing customers that would otherwise be buying things from their website would cost them millions of dollars, which would effectively be the exact same thing as if they got breached in the first place. So our goal is to basically identify any vulnerabilities that they might have. You should look for the different exploits, and you should be able to demonstrate that to the person. If they have a vulnerability such as a distributed denial of service, you need to be able to communicate to them. You need to be able to communicate that to them in another way other than just, hey, I conducted a DDoS attack and took your servers down. You should be able to show them how there's a vulnerability, and that's done through detailed note taking and presenting them to a technically competent person that is able to recognize and understand and be able to go back and trace your steps. So if you're wondering what is okay and what is not okay, that will get down here in the rules of engagement we'll look at in a second. But basically, you're going to be referencing this the whole time. You might be the one that has the ability to hack into somebody and the ability to bust into systems and take things down. You very well might be. However, the person that's ultimately in control at the end of the day is the owner of those systems. And if you have not been authorized to access certain things, you could literally be held legally liable for accessing things that you're not, and, suffer some pretty major consequences. So just because you have the ability to do something doesn't mean that you should, especially if you're not authorized to do it. So ethics is the moral debate between right and wrong, where an action may be legal, it may go against an individual's belief system of right and wrong. Penetration testers will often be faced with potentially morally questionable decisions during a penetration test. For example, they are gaining access to a database that is protected with sensitive data. Or they are perhaps performing a phishing attack on an employee to test an organization's human security. If that action has been agreed upon during the initial stages, it is legal, however, ethically questionable, which this is basically talking about social engineering and, sending somebody a convincing email to get them to click on a link. But, in doing that, sometimes the tactic that you'll use to persuade somebody to click on a link is, maybe use something personal that about that person in a spear phishing attempt, that you're going to use something that person personally would click on because of something. And so, it can be difficult and you feel a little bit bad doing it, just the social engineering aspect of it. But, I would say it's just important to understand what you're actually trying to accomplish. And it is training people, and we are trying to help people, keep their environment secure. So these things are important to test. Don't feel bad about it. You're authorized to do what you're doing, but you might feel a little bit bad sometimes. There's 3 different categories that in general we'll talk about when it comes to hackers. You got a white hat, a gray hat, and a black hat. Rather than reading all this, here's what it is. White hat are people that are authorized to do it. Black hat are people that are unauthorized to do it. Those are like the criminals and the hackers there. Then there's the gray hat that are basically some kind of mixture of both of those. Someone, maybe like in the hacktivist category or something like that. They are not necessarily hired by somebody, and they might cross the line between black hat and white hat more frequently, so you just label them as gray hat. So the rules of engagement, that's the document that I talked about earlier. Within that, you're telling them what you need to test and what you can test and what you can't test. So this is going to be the central thing that you are referencing back to at all points in time. You're not going to want to just sit back and neglect these things and pretend that they're not there and then not pay attention to it. It's very, very essential that you're referencing this and that you're paying a lot of attention to it, or else you might end up getting yourself into some serious trouble. So for the questions below, it says you are given permission to perform a security audit on an organization. What type of hacker would you be? That would be white hat. You attack an organization and steal their data. What would you be? Black hat. And what document defines how penetration testing engagement should be carried out? It's what we talked about earlier. Rules of engagement. All right, so the penetration testing methodologies. So penetration tests can have a wide variety of objectives and targets within a scope. Because of this, no penetration test is the same, and there are no one case fits all as to how a penetration tester should approach it. The steps a penetration tester takes during engagement is known as the methodology. A practical methodology is a smart one where the steps are taken in a relevant situation at hand. For example, having a methodology that you would use to test the security of a web application is not practical when you have to test the security of a network. Before discussing some industry standard methodologies, we should note that all of them have a general theme of the following stages. So the first stage would be information gathering. The second stage would be enumeration and scanning. The important thing that you think is that when you're doing enumeration and scanning, you're information gathering. But these are actually different things. So before you even enter in and go for the part where you're going to actually scan the systems and run a tool like Nmap or something like that, you're actually going to try to get as much information that you can in other forms, such as using Google and using social media and scanning as many different things as you can, finding out who all the employees are, finding what their IP address is just by looking at the DNS records and all kinds of different things like that. So that all takes place in the information gathering part. Then in enumeration and scanning, you move into going through, finding all the different vulnerabilities, making a note of them, and at that point, you exploit the vulnerabilities that you found. After you've exploited the systems, you move into a privilege escalation, and then at that point, you move into post-exploitation. So once you've escalated, you're at the highest privilege that you can get, then you're going to move into post-exploitation. You'll try to see what you can do from that position, what other hosts you can take over, what additional information you can get, covering your tracks after you've gone to hide from a security team, because though you're authorized to do this, one of the things that's being tested is basically just how they're able to detect it. So you should do the best you can to cover your tracks while you're there so that the security team that should be responsible for looking at it doesn't necessarily find you there. So the OSSTMM, which is the Open Source Security Testing Methodology Manual, provides a detailed framework of testing strategies for systems, software, applications, communications, and the human aspect of cybersecurity. Methodology focuses primarily on how these systems, applications communicate, so that includes a methodology for telecommunications, wired networks, and wireless communications. So the advantages of these is that it covers various testing strategies in depth. It includes testing strategies for specific targets. The framework is flexible depending on the organization's needs. The framework is meant to set a standard for systems and applications, meaning that a universal methodology can be used in a penetration testing scenario. So the disadvantages that you might be able to notice is that it's a difficult to understand framework, it's extremely detailed, and it uses unique definitions that might not necessarily be used across the board by everybody else. So OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. This is a community-driven and frequently updated framework used solely to test the security of web applications and services. This is extremely useful. If you're interested in penetration testing at all, you're really going to want to take note of OWASP. It should be something that you're referencing regularly, and if you're using web applications, you should be checking it too. The Foundation regularly writes reports stating the top 10 security vulnerabilities a web application may have in the testing approach and remediation. The advantages are that it's easy to pick up and understand. It's actively maintained and is frequently updated. Covers all stages of an engagement from testing to reporting and remediation. Specializes in web applications and services. The disadvantages, though, it may not be clear what type of vulnerability a web application has. They can often overlap. OWASP did not make suggestions to any specific software development life cycles. The framework doesn't hold any accreditations such as check. So the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, which is the National Institute of Technology Standards, or Standards for Technology. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's something that the United States government does. Oh, it's right here. National Institute of Standards and Technology. So there you go. Is a popular framework used to improve an organization's cybersecurity standards and manage the risk of cyber threats. This framework is a bit of an honorable mention because of its popularity and detail. The framework provides guidelines on security controls and benchmarks for success for organizations from critical infrastructure, power plants, etc., all through to commercial. There's a limited section on the standard guideline for the methodology a penetration tester should take. So the NIST framework is estimated to be used by 50% of American organizations by 2020. The framework is extremely detailed in setting standards to help organizations mitigate threats posed by cyber threats. The framework is frequently updated. NIST provides accreditation for organizations that use this framework. The NIST framework is designed to be implemented alongside other frameworks. So the disadvantages is that NIST has many iterations of frameworks, so it may be difficult to decide which one applies to your organization. The NIST framework has weak auditing policies, making it difficult to determine how a breach occurred. The framework does not consider cloud computing, which is becoming increasingly popular for organizations. So NIST is actually a large group of many different things. I'm not really sure what they're talking about there when they say that it doesn't consider cloud computing, because that just isn't true. The NIST publishes many different publications, and within each of these different publications, it talks very well in detail. So maybe they're referencing a specific framework that NIST writes, but NIST puts out special publications all the time that goes in depth on all of these things. So the difficulty that you might have when you're trying to figure all this out and using NIST specifically is just finding out which special publication to reference, whatever. So I guess I understand they're talking about the cybersecurity framework, and that maybe within this specific framework that it doesn't consider it. And that might be true. However, NIST publishes stuff all the time that is extraordinarily detailed. It's a wonderful resource. I don't think anybody should shy away from using it at all. And the disadvantages that are listed off here might apply to this, but NIST as a whole has plenty of different things that you can look into, and is a great resource. So the NCSC-CAF, which is the Cybersecurity Assessment Framework, is an extensive framework of 14 principles used to assess the risk of various cyber threats and organizations' defenses against these. The framework applies to organizations considered to perform vitally important services and activities such as critical infrastructure, banking, and the likes. The framework mainly focuses on and assesses the following topics: data security, system security, identity and access control, resiliency, monitoring, response, and recovering planning. So this framework is backed by a government cybersecurity agency. The framework provides accreditation. This framework covers 14 principles which range from security to response. The framework is still new in the industry, meaning that organizations haven't had much time to make the necessary changes to be suitable for it. The framework is based on principles and ideas, isn't as direct as having rules like some other frameworks. So this is just another different framework. So there's a lot of different things to choose from. You can just look at these on your own. The truth is that, unless you're just starting your own business and doing your own thing, and maybe as a freelance, the business that you get into is going to have their own framework that they follow, and you'll just need to follow along with that. Don't get hired by a company and then think you need to come in and change everything about them. But your most important thing, for the actual PenTest Plus exam, I would recommend that you have a general idea of what all these things are and maybe what the differences between each other are. And they all just have their own specific avenue that they address and the way that they address things. So I would know that. But what you should understand is just what the general timeline of a penetration test is, and that's covered right here, beginning with information gathering, moving to enumeration and scanning, exploitation, privilege escalation, and then finishing up in the post-exploitation stage. So let's see what the questions are for here. What stage of a penetration test involves using publicly available information? So that would be the information gathering. I believe that's what it is. And I missed an I there. If you ever see me miss an I on my keyboard, that key is not working properly on my keyboard. I have to press it a lot harder than I should. So if you wanted to use a framework for pen testing telecommunications, which framework would we use? And they're looking for the acronym there, not the full name. So this would be OSSTMM. I was making sure that that was the correct one. OSSTMM. And the framework that focuses on testing the web applications, OWASP. All right, so now this aspect of it is basically different types of engagements that you'll do. So don't get this confused with white hat, black hat, and gray hat. These aren't the same things at all. But this is basically what you're going to do when you go into a penetration testing engagement and what information you have leading up to the engagement before you enter into it. So the three different types that you're going to get is either a black box engagement, a gray box engagement, or a white box engagement. So rather than reading through these, to just sum it up for you, basically, black box would be that a random company calls you up and says they want a penetration testing conducted. They give you no information at all other than just telling you, what they're going to do. Obviously, all the same things that apply with a normal penetration test apply. You're not going to, and you shouldn't just get called by somebody one day and be like, hey, penetration, pen test my stuff. Because you can be held legally liable when you do something, and you need to have something in writing. You need to have rules of engagement clearly defined, what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. So this isn't saying that you go into something with literally nothing at all. You'll still have rules of engagement. They'll still tell you what you're limited to do. They'll still tell you what they don't want you to conduct any testing on. But you just move into it from there. But the company itself provides you with no information at all. So this means that you're going to have to spend a lot more time on the information gathering and the scanning and enumeration phase. White box testing is basically if you are given literally everything. You're given the source code to look at that you're testing. You're given full knowledge of basically the environment or the application itself, just full 100% perspective on literally everything. And so the advantage of this is that, you don't have to spend a lot of time wondering how things are. You don't have to spend as much time on the information gathering stage because you're just given all the information. The only thing that you might want to do is just spend time on the information gathering stage just to look and see if they might have forgotten to give you anything, or might just not know about some information that's out there about their company that they might not want out there. And so the gray box is basically a mixture of these. So you think about black boxes, you basically have no knowledge. White box, you've got full knowledge. You've got access to sort code. You probably have a network diagram, all kinds of different stuff. And then a gray box testing is basically some kind of mixture of the two. You don't have no information, but you don't have all the information. It's somewhat of a mixture of both. So you are asked to test an application, but are not given access to its source code. So I am going to say that this is black box. And you were asked to test a website and you are given access to the source code, so that would be white box. So the thing is, though, this is still just sort of a vague question, in my opinion. The first one. The second one, if you're given access to the source code, it's white box every single time. But up at the top, when you're not given access to the source code, obviously here they're looking for black box because they are just talking about this as application level as a whole. But the only scenario that you're given source code is in a white box scenario. Maybe in a gray box, they might give you source code for one thing or just a little bit. But, with penetration testing, you're not just focused on applications. You're focused on networks, specific systems, and different things like that. So just because you're not given source code does not necessarily mean that it's just a black box engagement. It absolutely could be a gray box engagement, and that's something to keep in mind on the exam. You probably will get asked a question or two similar to this one, and you need to think the only scenario that it's going to be black box is when you are completely given nothing, and all the information gathering is manually done by you. The only thing that you get is basically just the rules of engagement. So we are going to view this site, and Acme has approached you for an assignment. They want you to carry out the stages of a penetration test on their infrastructure. View the site by clicking the green button on this task and follow the guided instructions to complete this exercise. So let's look over here, the rules of engagement. So let's go through the stages of a penetration test assignment for the Acme company. This stage of the penetration test is where you define 3 primary objectives. Cycle through the tabs below to explore these. So, permission. For a penetration test to be ethical and legal, both parties, the company wanting to test their application for vulnerabilities and the company conducting the pen test, will sign a document giving clear permission for the intended actions. Test scope. The test scope will define what targets or environments are being tested against. For example, the client may only want you to test part of their application and not their entire network. Remember what I talked about earlier. This is an extremely important thing to keep in mind. You don't want to go beyond those rules of engagement and the scope that you're given, or you can get into some serious trouble. The rules define the type of behavior that a penetration tester will employ. For example, you may only have access to part of the application and not the entire server that hosts it. So the information gathering. So the information gathering stage of an engagement is often undervalued. This stage involves using publicly accessible channels to collect intel on your target. Abby, who has a public profile on LinkedIn, advertises that she works for Acme and even includes her email in her bio, which is a possible way we can target her work laptop and thus the company. So if we were to take that email, we can, through a phishing link, get access to her work laptop if she successfully clicks on it. So now the goal of this stage is to get a complete picture of your target. The penetration tester will try to identify user accounts, machines on their network shares, applications, etc. Information gathered from stage 2 and the engagement scope document will help in enumerating your target. So the enumeration phase is very important as your findings are used to exploit your target systems in stage 4. So let's pretend that Abby made a post on LinkedIn sharing a blog post that she wrote from Acme. From this post, you find that Acme's web server's IP is 97.37.50.151. So let's try to scan this IP address. So 96.37.50.151. And we'll scan the target. So you see that the attacker goes into the switch, goes to the target, and it sends the information back. And we just did a vulnerability scan. This is very basic stuff. Service vulnerable, web, yes, login, no. So the login is not vulnerable, but the web is vulnerable. So we figured that out. So let's move on to the next thing. So here we go. We just used Metasploit, and the exploitation stage involves knowledge from your enumeration, now to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in any of the applications that are in the scope. And so we figured out that their website was vulnerable in stage 3, and now we exploit the vulnerability using whatever Metasploit vulnerability we found, and we get into their website. So at this point, now you move into the post-exploitation phase, where you have gotten into the server, you compromise that. So now we're going to start working towards all the rest of the different things that we're going to be trying to do, like privilege escalation. So this is when we've got that unauthorized access, which unauthorized means that shouldn't have been able to accomplish, not literally unauthorized or allowed to even access the system. But at this stage of the engagement, your main goals will be to maintain access to the system and escalate your privileges within the system to a super user or administrator user. Systems are usually set up with normal users that don't have access to various sensitive files and functions. Gaining access to higher privileged users, such as administrators, will allow you to perform actions that you wouldn't be able to as a normal user, such as reading sensitive files and gaining access to all programs within the system. After doing this, you'll be extracting sensitive information from the system and attacking other components in the environment For example, if the system is part of a network, you will attempt to gain access to other machines in the network. So at this point, now we're going to sit back and we're going to create the report. Now the report is something that, people sometimes, when the only thing you ever do is work through, random labs and stuff, you're not actually writing anything. A lot of stuff on TryHackMe, the only thing that you're trying to do is just get into a machine, get the flag that's at the end of the machine, and type it into the question over here. So, right here, we get the flag is PenTest complete, and we can paste it in and submit it, and we just completed the room. But, stick around for this last second because this is really important stuff. In this, you're not going to think too much about actually writing up a report when you're just doing random labs on TryHackMe. But there's a couple things I want to mention. For the purpose of the PenTest Plus exam, if that's something that you're interested in, you're going to want to understand reporting and basically what you should be responsible for. Number two, you should want to pay a lot of attention in a real world environment. You have to be writing these reports. And a detailed report, not one that is just basically saying, I was able to hack into your system, but a step-by-step process of what you're doing. Because in order for somebody to fix what was wrong, they need to be able to see it. And basically, your goal at the end of a penetration test should be to be able to supply another person with a step-by-step methodology of what you did during that engagement, to be able to show them that what you did was legitimate, that you're not lying and just saying that you got into it, but also so that they can replicate it and see step by step, oh, this went wrong here. They were able to accomplish this because they got in here. How can I fix that from that point? So there's lots of different things that you're going to uncover in an actual penetration testing engagement. And the way that the client is able to actually fix those vulnerabilities and figure them out is by your report getting back to them. So going through and doing all of that, that's it. But so this is a really good room that TryHackMe added. And I think it's a really good one, especially for the PenTest Plus exam, that you're able to get into this and you're able to see it. But that is going to be all for this video today. These are going to come out a lot faster. The reason that I stopped is because I found out that TryHackMe was just updating all these rooms. And I didn't want to be doing rooms that were just going to get deleted and then the series wasn't actually going to be complete. So they usually don't do these types of rooms extraordinarily fast. They're not going to update this series for a while. So this will be a good series that should be good for a long time and hopefully is accurate. When I say a long time, I mean a few years at least. But so this is something to think about. Very important stuff, especially for the exam. Make sure, especially, that you know a lot of the information in the third tab, the different frameworks and what they do. And yeah, all this stuff, really good stuff. So we will see you back for the next one. Till then, thank you guys so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and I hope that I will see you again next time.